What's going on? This is the Saturday Down South podcast. I am Connor O'Gara. Will, draft day.
Yes,
it
sir.
has arrived. We are at the first Wednesday by the time people are listening to Wednesday of the month. That means we are going to be drafting today. We're going to be drafting 21st century SEC flag football teams. Now, I know what you're thinking, listener at home. Connor, that is such a July subject. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. I don't care. It's
Connor,
something we've wanted to do for a year, and we're doing it today.
I've never been this excited about a draft. I feel like if you could imagine that picture of Bill Belichick in the draft room where his dog is sitting there, imagine that's Walter the cat. He's sitting there. We've got all kinds of algorithms we're running. So honestly, hey, if you don't like this content, you'll like football because this is dudes being dudes right here. This is exactly what you're sitting around with your buddies talking about. Like flag football draft, man. Come on.
Yes. Look, it makes too much sense. Ever since we found out that the Olympics were going to be having flag football in 2028 when it's being hosted in LA, I was like, we got to do this draft at some point. And I can't remember who it was that threw it out there on Twitter at some point a long time ago. And I told them I would give them credit, and I forgot who it was, but this is me giving them credit. So I'm not stealing an idea from anyone. This has just been a long time coming. So great pod lined up. We're going to do that. We've got Josh Pate coming up in a bit. Long overdue to get him back on the show, plus a lad of the week. But first, got to talk to you guys about Dabble. I've been talking about Dabble for a while now. The DFS space, if you're into Major League Baseball, is so great for that. You like betting on props. This is the place to do it. Dabble is one of the newest and best apps in the DFS space, and they've wasted no time making a name for themselves. Dabble's social function is second to none, and they offer a wide variety of sports for making picks, including, as I mentioned, MLB. We're going to have college football coming up really soon. NFL is coming up really soon. You're going to want to get on that. Use that promo code SDS2 when you sign up today. Receive $25 in bonus cash. No deposit required. Again, that is promo code SDS2 for $25 in bonus cash, courtesy of the good folks at Dabble. All right, well, so we mentioned the genesis of this draft, why we are doing it. It is somewhat topical. I do miss the Olympics. I really do this time of year. I enjoyed it so much last year. And I thought, let's get into the spirit before we get some sort of ruling definitively that NFL players can't be in this. This should be independent of that because we're going to do this in a way that only we can do it, where we go back and we're looking strictly at 21st century SEC players to draft for a 5-on-5 flag football team. And it's got to have one quarterback, one defensive player. So one player who has been a predominantly defensive player throughout their college career, they were, and then 3 flex spots, which just like in fantasy football could be a wide receiver, a running back, or a tight end. Is that all clear? Do we have any questions?
What are the rushing rules for quarterbacks?
The rushing rules for quarterbacks, I believe, and I'd have to look this up because I am admittedly not a pro flag football expert. I am a recreational flag football expert. I believe the quarterback has to be rushed and like a 5-1,000 count. I think it is.
That's what we always played. Yeah,
that's what we play. So you know what? Let's just do it that way.
Let's do it that way. Yep.
Yeah. So quarterback can run past the line of scrimmage, but they have to be rushed, and it's going to be more of kind of an improv type situation unless there's some sort of trickery involved. But I think the official flag football rules are you can't do a run play if you're within either 5 or 10 yards of the end zone. That's when run plays are illegal. You can only do that on a 2-point conversion, I believe. So we will factor that in, I guess. You're not going to get a big bruising running back probably to be in this role, but it's a good question. It's a good question because if it was just strictly your quarterback has to stay behind the line of scrimmage the entire time, you're probably approaching this in a little bit of a different way. But let's approach it where quarterbacks can go past the line of scrimmage as runners if they are rushed.
Of course. Good? I'm locked in.
Okay. I won the last draft technically, although it was a comeback player draft or comeback thing draft in college football. So I guess I won it by voting, but in terms of the actual comebacks themselves, TBD on that. So I'm not going to count it as a true victory. So as I always do, I will defer to you. Will, would you like first pick or second two?
I'm so fired up, Connor. I can't wait to see where you go here. I'm going to go second two.
I was afraid you were going to say that.
How about this? I have a tier list on here. There's not a single guy you could take right now that would scare me because I got replacements for all my guys.
That's fine. So this For me, I am basing this on positional value. I
Okay.
think we would agree there is so much more depth at the flex spots to wide receiver, running back, tight end.
Mm-hmm.
I have all wide receivers, but I have to go quarterback first.
Okay.
I have to go quarterback first, and there's two obvious ones that come to mind, and I'll take one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Give me Joe Burrow. Give me Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow is 1-1. And look, I think that if you are playing flag football, you want a guy
Mm-hmm.
that keeps his eyes downfield at all times. And nobody that I've ever seen in the SEC since the time I've been doing this did that better than Joe Burrow. The thing that's so underrated about 2019 was that everybody's going to talk about the 60 touchdown passes, and understandably so, and historically great offense. But him going from a 58% passer to a 76% passer who attacked downfield at will is
Mm-hmm.
insane. 527 attempts in 6 picks is just, it's like the perfect number, because if he was at 0 picks with a number like that, I'd be kind of worried. But it's 6 for 527. That's just like the best ratio possible for
Mm-hmm.
me. And also had the 12
He was
rushing
like
touchdowns.
if Aaron Rodgers wasn't a coward.
Yeah, I don't like the Aaron Rodgers mention ever.
I was dumping on him. Come on, that was the joke about Rodgers, is he didn't throw enough picks. Burrow was out there slinging it.
This is true. This is true. Yeah. I mean, because even if we're dumping on him, it's a reminder that he still owns my team, and we don't need to go there.
Mm-hmm.
But you're right. Like, that's, to me, like, Joe Burrow, he checks every box of what I would want for a flag football quarterback, and just so smart. Also, the underrated thing that he did was he could recognize when a defense had his back turned to him and just turn around and 15, 20 yards. Even last year in that game against the Giants, it was, what was it like? I think it was a Sunday night game. I want to say it was a Sunday night game, and the entire Giants defense turned its back to him, and he ripped off this like 75-yard touchdown run kind of out of nowhere when the Bengals really, really needed it early in that game. And yeah, Joe Burrow 1-1. I don't know why I had to explain it that long.
Joe Burrow was my third quarterback.
Third. Interesting. So now this is the strategy of this.
Yes.
You could, in theory, sit on quarterback until your last pick, because I'm obviously, I'm out on quarterbacks. I can't take another one. So you could do that unless you wanted it to look better on the graphic and have that as like your, higher up on the, the hierarchy. But you can go in a lot of different directions with now having the second two.
Okay. So already this is off the rails, because you said something off air that I was like, aha. I'm also going to go positional valuability here. This is a guy who I would have taken 1 overall. Kyle Pitts.
Whoa. Wow.
Kyle Pitts. 6'6". Okay. Imagine trying to cover that gentleman. That's going to change your defensive player right there. Okay. Because at the end of the day, that guy is as fast as almost any receiver we've seen in the NFL. In the red zone of a flag football game, give me Kyle Pitts. Who's stopping that guy if you can't get a body on him? His only problem in the NFL is that he's not physical enough. Okay, imagine if he was playing flag football where he didn't have to block, he didn't have to get chipped. He's just standing there. Now you got to draft somebody who's at least 6'1", 6'2" to even tip the ball when he puts his hands up in the end zone.
That's wow. I did not think, you're right. This is off the rails already. I did not anticipate Kyle Pitts being your first pick. He was not on my board for that reason of, look, it's the tight end position. There are receivers that I feel like that can do a lot of the things that he does. I don't know that he's getting the type of separation that you would want. How much, but then again, you're right, because how much of what he did at Florida, and again, that's what we're talking about here. We're not even factoring NFL stuff. We're just talking about the player that they were, and the player that Kyle Pitts was in 2020 was totally unguardable. One of the greatest tight ends in college football history in that very condensed, unique season. But what made him so good, there was just no matchup for him.
Yeah.
There's just none. And you're right. Now, as I'm thinking about even my defensive player, I'm kind of scrambling, and I'm wondering if I have to rethink my strategy based on that Kyle Pitts pick.
Yes, absolutely. Now, I got another one coming up, right? I think we're aligned on Kyle Pitts, okay?
Now at least, yeah.
I actually think, and this is a change of my defensive player for the reason of that, right? Or for that reason. So I was initially going to go with Tyrann Mathieu, obviously. But then I thought about bigger players, guys like that. There is one guy that I think you could draft that actually could stop Kyle Pitts. I'm going to draft him right here. Patrick Peterson.
On my board. Third on my board, on my defensive player board. That's a great call.
Patrick Peterson has the size. He's 6'1", 6'2", 220 pounds, all pro return man. Track speed, he's significantly faster than Tyrann Mathieu. He could get up with the biggest guy you're going to draft. Now, again, as a defensive player in real football, I'm going to take Tyrann Mathieu. Here's the thing. He would probably get personal foul calls in 7-on-7 football because he would still hit you. That's the thing about Tyrann Mathieu. You can't take that dog out of him. Patrick Peterson is the most technical corner I've ever seen, right? He was inbound against Alabama, not worth getting into here, right? But he knows exactly where to put his feet. He knows exactly, where to be with his body. And I think that's so important for a defensive player here. Yes, Tyrann Mathieu, lower center of gravity. But in terms of body control for his size, I think Patrick Peterson could cover anyone in SEC history, and that's why he has the versatility. He's number 2 off the board.
This is a great call. I can't push back on that. There are probably a ton of different guys that you could pick for your defensive spot. I'm not trying to tip my pick here. I think you have to go defensive back. I think that makes the most sense for what we're doing today. And you could tell me, and you need to pick a defensive back that can either cover that biggest guy on the field in that sort of 5-on-5 setting, or they could be able to occasionally rush the passer. But I would still probably want to use one of those offensive players in something that's a little bit more raw, given, what you're trying to do. It's not like you're being asked to line up against offensive tackles and you need to be as technically sound as some of those defensive ends are. Patrick Peterson's a great call. It's a great call. You could almost do this draft with LSU defensive players exclusively, but we won't do that. We would upset too many people if we did that.
Not Jamal Adams.
Yeah.
Get him off the field.
Yeah. Maybe not that one. I had a couple others in mind.
Yeah.
Okay, so now that means I'm going to save my defensive player for my last pick because why wouldn't I?
Of course.
And I have a debate over 2 receivers here. Which one do I go? All right, I'm going to go with the one, even if it means I don't get my second guy on my board, I have to take this guy. I can't leave this draft without taking this guy. Percy Harvin. Man. Peak Percy is my favorite football video game player of all time. Like Madden, EA Sports, like there are so few guys that you felt like were truly a cheat code in that way. Like college football 09, whatever it was. I remember my freshman year in college and borrowing, that video game. And for 3 weeks, that was about all I did, was just Florida dynasty mode, whatever they called it back then. I don't remember if they called it dynasty mode. Jet sweeps, crossers, Percy, all day. The route tree was what
Gator
it was.
heavy, right? A little Gator heavy. Remember that was just him as the only receiver, and he'd run around the outside. Oh yeah,
it was unfair. It was unfair. And when healthy, that was him in real life as well. So I don't mean to just say video game Percy was the only reason I'm taking him here, but I worry with Percy Harvin that his numbers are going to kind of fade over time, and we need to just have maybe once a month is maybe too frequent. Semi-annually, a couple of times a year, just a Percy Harvin appreciation moment where we just sit back and look at what he did in college and how unique it was at that H-back position in the Urban Meyer offense. Because even though he was never a 1,000-yard receiver, he was a 1,600 yard from scrimmage guy, or like 1,500 yards from scrimmage. Urban said on the Triple Option podcast that he does with Mark Ingram and Rob Stone that Percy is arguably the best player to ever put on a helmet.
Yep.
Think about the guys that he has coached. All right. Think about what Urban has seen in his time in the college football landscape. He's like, Percy, that's the dude. When he was healthy, there is something so unbelievable about what he did with his size and his speed. And Urban talked about like how he was so violent, but the greatest attribute of Percy was that he would never get hit. He would never get hit because of how elusive he was, his awareness. That plays in flag football. And while he's not going to be one of these jump up and go get it type of guys with the right sort of spacing, I just think that Percy is a nightmare cover. I don't know who covers him. Peak Percy scores 7 touchdowns in the first half of a flag football game and makes opposing defenses start playing Quidditch. Like that's how good he is. That's how demoralizing Percy Harvin was. So I'm glad to get him with my first flex spot.
I need to go watch their matchups because they played. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get my camera to focus. There we go. I need to go watch those matchups they played. So I got to see Patrick Peterson versus Percy Harvin. Man, we didn't know we had.
Wouldn't they just Oh, I guess they would have just barely overlapped because
Yeah.
Percy's last season was 09.
Exactly.
So it would have been fresh. Yeah, I guess only 1 year. Patrick Peterson was. Oh no, he's my age.
Yeah,
So
they're about the same age. I don't know year to year, but I think they at least had a couple years of overlap because they played every year. Obviously, it was the cross series rivalry. So so I like Percy Harvin. He was on the S tier. He's kind of like the only of those guys left on here. Another tip. I think I can get 80% of him later on. But that is an S tier guy here because he's so hard to catch. Like with flag football, you gotta get a shifty guy, right? That you don't get near him, but you also gotta get a straight line speed guy. And I think Percy Harvin was both of those things.
Yeah. All right. I feel better about my board after admittedly feeling like I had to backpedal. All right. So it's your pick.
Okay. So I could go a couple of ways here. And I feel like you're going to push back on the statistical part of this, but I think putting this guy on a football field in 7-on-7 would be very helpful.
5-on-5. 5-on-5.
Oh, sorry. You're right. You're right. Like that type of format. You're exactly right. Yeah. But same here, right? DK Metcalf.
Wow. Okay. Did not expect you to go that way.
Like I said, that defensive player is sweating right now, right? Because you got Kyle Pitts, you got DK Metcalf. They're two burners, right? They're two guys with incredible body control. But at the same time, right, they have soft hands. I think personally that Pitts has better hands. But I think having two of those guys just running around out there, and you have to cover both of them in a 5-on-5 format. And obviously, I know you said no to the NFL, right? And a lot of the question about DK in college was, okay, is this guy a good route runner? Is he tactical? All that stuff. None of that stuff matters in 505. That's the best part of it. You just got to be open. DK Metcalf down there somewhere, they say. He will be.
There's an intimidation factor as well. Because you don't have pads to cover it up. When DK is out there in pregame warmups of a flag football game,
I'm giving him the most European shorts, dude. He's going to be out there in one of those flak jackets. He's going to be swole. He's just going to be barking at you guys. Him and Kyle Pitts are going to be standing there, arms crossed, staring at your huddle. It's going to be electric.
DK's sitting there like a cyborg.
Yep.
And you're wondering in this non-contact sport if you've already lost just by the simple fact that guy showed up on the field. Look, DK when he was healthy in that brief time at Ole Miss was still very, very good. Now he never had the full season in part because of the timing of when he was at Ole Miss to be there from 2016 to 2018. Obviously, that timing just did not line up for him in the way that it could have. And with pretty much every other iteration of Ole Miss surrounding that, if he gets to Ole Miss 2 years earlier, it's different. If he gets to Ole Miss 2 years later, it's different. And that's kind of a bummer to look back on. And there's always going to be people like, how did Ole Miss not win a million games, even though they had AJ Brown and DK Metcalf and Jordan Ta'amu, who's doing great things in the UFL? But
underrated. Yeah.
Probably underrated given, the circumstances and the fact that they just didn't have a defense at all and their depth was so limited. But it's still a team game, and DK just did not necessarily stay healthy for that full year. And I do think he's gotten better since since he got to the NFL. Like he's gotten a lot better with that stuff because of how pronounced it was in the pre-draft process of like, you have to, I hit my mic. Apologies for the people. I'm talking
about fired up today, boys. That's the first time I've ever seen you do that. Yeah.
My bad. I'd never do that. But that because of how that pre-draft conversation went, it was almost like, if I don't get better at this, I'm not really going to have much of a chance.
Yes, and I think too, like, very good to note, not the NFL, I get that. But like I said, the issue with him was really just health and situation. Like you said, when he played, he was disgusting. So yeah, that's my pick.
All right, I'm thrilled to get this guy with my third pick. And I thought you were for sure taking him. Jamar Chase. Come on.
Okay.
If you're playing single coverage, you're cooked. Then, now, I don't care. I have seen too many instances of that guy take over at the college level to make me think that he would struggle in a flag football setting. And I understand he's not the physical freak that DK is, and he's not always going to be this jump up, go get it type of guy. I fully acknowledge that. But he can do everything still. He can still do everything you want to do on a football field. And if we're getting into the connection with Joe Burrow, that's a little added bonus for me here, having already taken that. But I just think that whether it's the body control, that guy could toe tap, that guy would have moments in which, he would force a defense to triple cover him. The Oklahoma game in the Peach Bowl was one of the most remarkable things I've ever seen. with how Oklahoma treated Jamar Chase and what it did to Justin Jefferson in single coverage, if you even want to call it that, by the end of that day. And I remember being in that post-game locker room with Jamar, and he's saying, y'all saw what they did. I don't care. Let them all triple cover me. You'll see what Jets can do. And Justin Jefferson, obviously. And
we saw,
buddy. We saw. And I'm convinced Justin Jefferson could have had 300 yards and 6 touchdowns if they had actually had a meaningful fourth quarter in that game. But of course, that wasn't the case. He just changes everything about what a defense can do. And it doesn't matter if he has sat an entire season like he did in 2020. That guy's still going to walk onto the football field and dominate everybody on it. So I'm thrilled to get Jamar Chase this late in the draft.
I think he's a very prototypical wide receiver, right? And that's really helpful in this case. I think he has no flaws. And if you're looking for kind of who do you pick to cover, I think him and Percy are very different players, right? Percy's a little bit more of a burner. He's a little bit better in open space. But with Chase, you almost still have to stick your best guy on him because he knows how to get open in a way that Percy, it's you have to have a certain speed threshold to cover him. But with Jamar, you could have all the tangibles and he could still cook you.
Yeah. And it might seem obvious because of how good he was that season, but it is a shame to look back on his college career and think we only got 1 year of that. We only got 1 year of Jamar Chase being that star because of the way that 2020 played out. It's one of the great what ifs, probably of the Ed Orgeron era. If he is able to, well, I shouldn't say if he's able to, if he decides that he wants to play football in 2020 instead of, understandably, using that right that he had to just opt out of that season, not face any real punishment, stay in ridiculously good shape and go on to the NFL. Does LSU in the 2020s play out differently? Perhaps it does. Perhaps it doesn't. But Jamar Chase, he could have 3 years off, and I would still bank on him going on to a field and finding a way to just pick apart an entire defense.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. Yeah, we have entirely different lists here, which I think is...
I think we do.
Yes.
You have taken 2 guys that were not on my board at all, and then Patrick Peterson was my 3rd defensive player on the board.
Okay, who's number 2? Well, actually, let's wait till you take your guy. We'll get there.
Can't tip that one just yet, but we'll get there.
Okay, so, gosh, there are so many ways that I could go. This is actually kind of the critical pick here, right? So I have to take a quarterback. So I basically get 2 more flex guys, right? This guy and another guy?
Correct. You have 1 more flex guy and then 1 more quarterback. That's what you still have to take. So, I mean, you, in theory, could take your quarterback with your last pick. Yes, you have to take a quarterback at some point, though, unless... I mean, I guess technically, well, you know what? For the sake of this draft, let's stick with that. You have to still take a quarterback.
Okay, cool. So this would be my last skill guy, is what I'm asking.
Yes, your last flex. Yeah.
Okay. Remember, I said I could get you 80% of Percy Harvin. Well, this is going to be a great little 2-stack here. Kadarius Toney.
Wow. Okay. Yes. You're going with the entire 2020 Florida team. Do you want to just take Trayvon Grimes while you're at it?
Well, here's the deal, man. 2020 was basically flag football, right?
True.
So I got real reps here that these 2 gentlemen can play together, go high-low. Again, talking about a bubble screen, talking about a guy who can get a little bit of rushing attempt going. Imagine chasing Kadarius Toney with flags on him. I feel like it's like he's covered in grease or something. He has all the Mario shells. He's throwing stuff at you. I feel like the again, not the athletic ability, not the receiving ability of Percy Harvin, but just the I don't want to tackle that guy where you don't know what Kadarius Toney is going to do. He might grab some grass off the ground and throw it at you. He might disappear into thin air. He's just that type of dude. You never know what Kadarius, he might fumble. I don't know. But you as a defensive coordinator got to worry about that just as much as I do. And I think I've got these 2 kind of titans over here, and I've got this small, fast guy, and I think that's the way to do it.
Kadarius Toney is going to be a complicated person to look back on because of the way that his NFL career played out. Yep. And because for so much of his Florida career, he was get Kadarius Toney more touches. How can they not get Kadarius Toney more touches? It was the same conversation every single year. And then don't you know it, 2020 finally happened and he got the touches that he needed and he became a star. And it was a revelation to watch what he turned into. I was amazed that he became a first-round receiver given the questions that we had about his usage coming into that year. But I've been asked a question before, most electric players you've ever seen in person. Kadarius Toney's on that list. He's on that list as one of the top 5 guys. And I go back to the play that he made in that Miami season opener that was in Orlando, and I remember being there. It was a play where I'm pretty sure it was the short side of the field, on the right side of the field. It was a little bubble screen. And he ran through, I think, 3 different Miami tacklers
Mm-hmm.
and had this level of explosion that the entire press box audibly gasped and went, "Whoa, that is different." I don't know if I've ever seen anything quite like that before, but that was every Florida fan's Kadarius Toney fantasy in one play.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of, obviously in that season, it didn't necessarily prove to be like how it played out week in, week out. But when you saw that on full display in 2020 with the weapons around him and the way that Mullen was able to use him, like, it was a sight to see. It really, really was. So I love the Kadarius Toney pick. A guy that I probably shouldn't have just overlooked in this process, was not on my big board. Maybe should have been. God, I like the way that your board is shaping up. Even though if I don't know that it's going to win the popular vote, it would be terrifying to see all these guys on the same field together.
I mentally was like, here are my S tier guys, and I'm like, Kyler's definitely drafting Percy Harvin. I got to get 80% of that. And I go, look no farther than Kadarius Toney. Here it is.
Will, how about this? 3 of our first 7 picks are Florida receivers or tight ends.
Yep.
None of those Florida players had a 1,000-yard season. At least 1,000-yard receiving season, I should say, because Percy obviously got there from scrimmage. But
so did Toney. Toney had 984 receiving, and then once you factor in scrimmage, he was about 1,100.
Yeah, so close.
But it's a flex. I think that scrimmage is what matters.
Yeah, you're exactly right. You're exactly right. Okay, so this is not the best player on my board. And I guess I can tip this pick now because you have no flexes left. Okay. If I was taking the best player, I would go Devontae Smith. I would. Okay. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do this because this is how I feel like my roster could be maximized in this setting. You know what? Maybe I will. Maybe. You know what? Screw it. I'm still going to take him. I'm still going to take Devontae Smith. I'm still going to take Devontae Smith. I almost took Mike Evans. That's who my other thought was for this.
He was my dupe to Kyle Pitts.
Yeah. Mike Evans would have been a great response to this. But you know what? 2020 Devontae Smith, I don't care what anybody says. You could say COVID this, COVID that. What that dude did.
COVID players.
To elevate. Yeah, we do have 3 COVID players at this point.
No, actually, Chase didn't play for COVID. Never mind. He was eligible, but so never mind.
Correct. What Devontae Smith did after the Jalen Waddle injury.
Yep.
It's one of the most impressive 9-game stretches, whatever it was, that you'll ever see from anybody at any position. And I know the defense, like the defensive depth was not there that year, but that dude had 23 receiving touchdowns and 1,856 yards against SEC defenses, Notre Dame and Ohio State. No sort of cupcake games. This isn't, there's some criticism last year with a couple of the Biletnikoff Award finalists with where they got their production from. This was not that at all. And man, I just think that if you forget how good 2020 Devontae Smith was, you're doing him a disservice, a massive disservice. He was an all-pro receiver that was playing against college guys. That's what it felt like. And if you want to, I don't know, go cover him with a linebacker, you'll be a meme forever. Like that's how good he was. That's how heads and shoulders above the entire competition he was. It felt unfair that Alabama had him at its disposal. Yep. And even, before he got hurt in the national championship against Ohio State, I think, again, as we mentioned with Justin Jefferson, could he have had 300 receiving yards in that game? Pretty easily.
Yeah.
Like, very,
World
very
was his
easily.
oyster on that day, yeah.
They had, 2 weeks to prepare for that guy?
Watching Ohio State's defenders, like their draft stock just like plummet during that game was so funny. I was like, are these guys any good?
How much do you think Tough Borland gets reminded about that play?
Yep.
About trying to cover Devontae Smith. Do you think he has that picture in his locker to remind himself, buddy, you need to get better, you need to get faster every single day? I don't know the day-to-day whereabouts of Tough Borland, but I do know that's the only thing I can ever think of when it comes to that play. And really that Ohio State team as a whole, as great as it was, even though they didn't deserve to be in the Big Ten championship, that's a different discussion for a different time. But I'm taking Devontae.
Championship. God, 2020 was so funny, dude.
Look, I'm taking Devontae, even though I know that if I just looked at it on paper, I would probably say Mike Evans would make more sense with how I have constructed this team, but I don't care. 2020 Smitty was a sight to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, another technical receiver. I think he's quick, like quick, not fast, if that makes sense. Like I think he's quick out of his breaks. I think he has that like acceleration and he knows when to be fast. So I think, yeah, it's there's going to be a lot of timing routes in your offense for sure.
And look, the contested catches weren't what I thought. I think he only had 11 or 12 that year. And then I was reminded that also nobody could really guard him. So you don't
Connor,
have a whole lot of
Jerry Rice highlights.
Not a whole lot of contested catches. Not as many as Randy Moss. Not nearly as many as Randy Moss.
This is one of my favorite little like turns of phrase in like leadership. I go watch Jerry Rice highlights. Not a lot of highlight plays in that guy's career. You know why? He was just open. Here's the cool thing. If you're just running open on every play, you don't have to do that. Being 6 feet tall and from Mississippi Valley State doesn't matter as much. That's a good receiver as a guy who doesn't have to do that all the time.
I would take Jerry Rice on my flag football team.
Of course. Yeah, of course.
Definitely would. All right, so that means you have one pick left. You have a quarterback left to take. You can go in any non-Joe Burrow direction that you would like. Who is your pick?
Easy. Money Manziel.
Yep. It's got to be.
Money Manziel. So you see how I built the team now. Okay, you went Burrow. Well, I know what Money Manziel works well with. Big dudes. Talked about Mike Evans, right? That's why that was a dupe for Kyle Pitts. Could have got the 2 stack there. Imagine Money Manziel just running around. Imagine Kadarius Toney just running around. Imagine 2 giant guys that you have to commit your defensive player who's yet to be seen. You got to commit your defensive player to one of those guys because Kyle Pitts could just stand there. Also, you got DK Metcalf doing, again, whatever he's going to do. He's like a fusion between the other 2 guys. With Money Manziel, the thing about him is he played backyard football at Texas A&M and beat Alabama that way.
He treated it like it was flag football the whole time.
Yes, and that's why number 2 for me was Jaden Daniels. You know why? Because I've seen these people on my team play this style of football.
He was third on my board.
Yep, I've seen DK Metcalf just out there not knowing his route, getting wide open. Everybody here has real live reps, and so I've seen Manziel win real football games, just like Mike Evans down there somewhere. Again, imagine them as 2 big guys and Kadarius Toney who's just growling at you. I'm locked in. And Patrick Peterson, I guess, would be kind of like the adult of the group who gets everybody to bed on time, wakes everybody up. I like that for him.
The only reason I didn't have Manziel at 1, and I had him at 2, so we're splitting hairs. I had Jaden at 3, like whatever direction you want to go, and that's perfectly fine.
Same top 3 is fine.
Yes, I think we'll get to honorable mention, so I'll save the others for later. But the only thing that prevented me from putting him at number 1 and why I had Joe Burrow ahead of him, if a defense figures out, just don't rush him. How much does that change the entire game plan? And if you force him to actually sit there behind the line of scrimmage and make those decisions without a rusher, is he actually worse? And is that the defensive strategy against Johnny Manziel? And what does it all of a sudden look like if that's the case? And he's got to go through his progressions, and then he's got to point, this guy open without necessarily having the threat of like, oh, is he about to run? That's maybe the only reason, but that's still not even a good enough reason. Obviously, I would still take him any day, and would still feel like that's going to suck to have to defend for the duration of a game.
Now, not that I'm going to ever jump on Joe Burrow, right? But I would have the inverse strategy because guess who my pass rusher would be on every play? Again, DK Metcalf. I would get him in the 3-point stance. I have him chasing Joe Burrow off the line every play. And let's see how many plays he can make that amazing play he always makes.
Joe Burrow saw some swamp monsters in the SEC.
What's his name? Walker in the SEC championship game. I've seen him do it a ton. However, not as often as a Jaden Daniels or a Manziel because his line was so good. His receivers were so good. So I'm going to have pressure in his face every play in this game.
Fair. Johnny Manziel, maybe he will play flag football on the Olympic team. Who knows? Don't know that he's in physical shape to do that in 2028, but we'll see. We'll see. Never rule it out. All right, so that means my defensive player is left. There is a guy that is number 1 on my board. I mean, Honey Badger's number 1 on my board. Screw it. I'm taking Honey Badger. Badger. I almost took Eric Berry. Would have no problem whatsoever taking Eric Berry as like the over-the-top safety that's going to allow DK Metcalf to not run free and could actually go body to body with him. I'm just taking Honey Badger as my defensive playmaker and knowing that guy is going to find a way to disrupt an offense because, oh my God, could he do that in ways I don't know that we've ever seen, at least from a defensive back in the SEC. 2 years that we get of Tyrann Mathieu. Why did I pronounce it that way? Tyrann Mathieu.
Most people pronounce it
2 years. And here's all you need to know about how quickly he became a national revelation in the sport. There was like a 2-3 month stretch in my college house where the most popular phrase that you would hear, we would just say to one another, in a random moment, Honey Badger don't care.
Mm-hmm.
Honey Badger don't care. That video, if you want to go deep into the YouTube, it's a 2011, I think that video was. Honey Badger don't care. There's a couple other words that go with that we won't say on these airwaves. But he was something that I think you had to see to truly appreciate. And I know we say that about a lot of different guys, but these numbers, it felt like even more. And these numbers are ridiculous. 11 forced fumbles in 2 seasons. Smashed the LSU record. It did that as a guy playing 2 seasons. He picked off 4 passes. He had 16 TFLs. That guy can rush the passer just fine. He had 4 touchdowns, 2 of which were as a punt returner, and then 2 were fumble recoveries. He recovered 6 fumbles. He forced 11 fumbles and recovered 6 of them.
Mm-hmm.
That's almost impossible. Like you could sit there and do that against air and just spike a football and have like 2 other people chase it. I don't think you're going to get 6 of them. Like, yep. I can't describe Honey Badger in a way that's going to do him justice. I just know I want that guy on my team. I don't care that he's 5'9". There's nothing wrong with being 5'8" or 5'9" as far as I'm concerned. I know I said a lot of negative things last podcast about that. That's in the past. Honey Badger don't care where you line him up. He's making plays. I'll take him as my defensive player.
Yes. And like I said, I started there. I was going to take him number 1 overall, but then I thought to myself, what if Kyle Pitts just stands in the end zone and puts his hands up? What's he going to do? And the answer is going to penalty because he's not going to let him score, but he's not going to be able to reach his hands. And by the way, we had the same 3 on defense too, because when I initially started thinking this, I went, Eric Berry would be fire. He's, again, like always been a super smart player, special teamer, super athletic. Like I said, he just has a little bit of everything. He's like Alante Taylor is like a diet version of him, where it's like just a great leader, great dude,
True.
Great guy to have on your team. He's waking up Kadarius Toney to be on time and then sound like we were joking about. And so point being, like, I love Eric Berry. I love Tyrann Mathieu. I think that, again, it's just what he is a chaos agent, right? So I think the cool thing about this is we've never really seen him play this sport. He might have been a whole new way to play that sport. That's the other thing. He might just be playing a position in this sport where you're just like, he's developed magnetism. He can just catch the ball. He's worked on his vertical. Now he can just jump 3 feet in the air. So, yeah, I think putting him on the field, especially, again, opposing Johnny Manziel, they're kind of pointing at each other, doing their thing. I think that would be fire.
Do you think Honey Badger goes for the flag or the ball when he attempts a tackle in flag football? Just
hand
one,
control.
like he gets
just
both.
One each. Yep.
He goes away.
High lows him every time.
He just grabs a football and a flag in the same play, and you're like, what do we call now? Was he down, or did he have the fumble? How exactly did that go?
You look up and your flag is tied to his hand. You're like, how did he do this? Is that illegal?
Yeah. And as a punt returner too, was also electric, man. Such a shame that it turned out the way that it did in his pre-draft season, whatever you want to call it, in 2012.
Lay off the weed. Yeah, that was just insane. The Les Miles era was a crazy, crazy time. I'm glad that, like, kind of I was younger for that, because I don't know how adult me would have processed the stuff that was going on behind the scenes, and Tyrann Mathieu getting kicked, and Ryan Perrilloux getting kicked off the team for weed. And I'm like, this is SEC football, dog. Like, there are some players that were actively accomplices to murder and such around the same era. Like, I don't know why that's why we're kicking guys off the team.
Little teaser for next week's pod. I'll just say it. We got Matt Flynn coming up next week. Ryan Perrilloux gets mentioned because, buddy, if you thought I was going to have Matt Flynn on the show and not bring up Ryan Perrilloux, you're crazy. Real ones know. All right. So before we do some honorable mention, let's recap this and vote on this at the SDS pod on Twitter. I'll make it a point to leave the poll up for a week for those of you that are in off-season mode. You're not listening to this, is the second that we drop that, perfectly fine. Your team will Kyle Pitts, Patrick Peterson, DK Metcalf, Kadarius Toney, Johnny Manziel. My team. I'm actually now realizing this. I don't think I diversified enough, and I went I was the one who went too LSU heavy on this. My team: Joe Burrow, Percy Harvin, Jamar Chase, Devontae Smith, Tyrann Mathieu. Anybody's game.
Yeah.
I love the direction that you went though, because you didn't just go, well, hey, DK Metcalf never had 1,000-yard receiving season in the SEC.
Mm-hmm.
Like there were questions about him coming out. You're like, no. You could have lined that guy up anywhere and found a way to be able to have some sort of production out of him just because of the physical things that guy could do at such a young age. This is going to be, I think this is going to be really close. If I do win, it's going to be because Percy Harvin. I'll call that shot right now.
Yep. And it's going to be interesting to see what Florida fans think about this too, because I did just end up with 2 Florida players.
True. Good point.
But yeah, I'm a big believer in what they call, min-maxing in strategy games. I find out what my teams are good at, and I just do that. Like, I'm like, you know what? Here's what we're doing today. Chaos, right? So I would love to see these 2 teams play in real life. Thinking about, again, like the poise of Joe Burrow, the chaos of Buddy Manziel. You have some really tactical route runners. Patrick Pearson, really tactical. But on defense, you have the chaos agent, and I have more chaos on offense. So I think that would be a very, very fun matchup.
It would be. Would love to be able to see it, make it happen, people. Honorable mention. The only other quarterback that I would have considered for this was Bryce Young.
Okay.
Because I think there would be a lot of people that be like, oh, well, Milroe, his rushing ability. You have to be able to throw on the run. That's such a big thing with this. And for what it's worth, we're talking like you had to have actually played in the SEC. So Oklahoma's an SEC team now, but I'm not going to retroactively say that Baker played in the SEC, so you can't do that. But Bryce could throw on the move at such a high level and at a better level than Tua could. For my money, still, Bryce is the best Alabama quarterback of all time. I don't care if I get pushback on that. I would still take him over Tua, and just think that the circumstances around him that second year with the receiver room was troubling. But, man, I think that there would be I'd have a really tough time not coming away with one of those 4 guys, because we talked about Jaden as well. Jaden was third on my board. The things that he did from an accuracy standpoint were just ridiculous that second year as a starter at LSU. And that'd be the player that we would take, and you turn your back on him and all of a sudden he's gone. Good luck rushing him. The guy, once he figured out how to work through his progressions at LSU, you were just not stopping Jaden Daniels. So those are the only 4 with Manziel and then Burrow that I considered. Was there any others that kind of came to mind for you that deserved consideration in your opinion?
2 names that didn't come up that I think were ball knowers for not considering. Jalen Waddle was not that guy in college.
No. Let's stick with quarterbacks. Let's stick with quarterbacks before we get to flex and
okay, yeah. The other guy was going to be Cam Newton. This is not a Cam Newton game. You know why? You don't rush him.
Yes. Okay, so I thought about this. It was my first initial thought. If you're doing anything all time 21st century SEC, and there's going to be Auburn fans that are going to push back on this, so much of what made Cam special was the combination of power and speed. And it's not to say that those abilities would have been limited. Cam Newton is still going to have great success playing flag football. But if his greatest attribute is being able to run that fast at that size and not so much his accuracy at that stage of his career, then I feel like I'm not getting the full best version of Cam Newton. And that's why I didn't necessarily want to put him in that tier for this. But again, kind of like the DK Metcalf thing. You see Cam Newton warming up before the game.
Yep.
Do we lose already? Is the game already over?
Yeah, and there's a version of this, right? Like, it's so funny because you start thinking about what exactly flag football. Okay, we took this seriously. I like this because that's what I was making the point about who we didn't draft, right? Like, Trask, I think, would have also been solid. I think, like, Sneaky would have been an air raid guy like Will Rogers because he's good at timing routes, and there's not an element of that where it's like you have a ton of attempts. I've seen you throw a ton of attempts and hit guys in stride, and that's what this game would be. But yeah, the guy like a Dak Prescott is not useful to us here.
Dak would be all right, but Tebow is, you're not getting the full version of Tebow. You're not getting him like stiff arming dudes in the same way that you would, and obviously that can still be a part of that. But I don't know if Tebow would be whistled for flag guarding every single time or how that would work. But you just don't feel like his
chest. You'd have to like,
like quick. I want like quick delivery. And I feel like Tebow might not be best for that 5-on-5 tackle football. He's going 1-1. There's no doubt about it. But I would agree with you. That's probably the list of guys that could at least be considered for something like this, but probably in that next tier just out. Wide receiver, running back, tight end, that flex spot, you could have gone in a million different directions. We took some of the guys that obviously were at the top of my board. Amari Cooper.
Yep. Underratedly amazing at Alabama. I mean, I think, is he Alabama's best receiver? Smitty, I guess, has taken his title, but like it's kind of those two guys. We could talk about the Julios and all those guys, but statistically, game to game in college, Amari Cooper was, until we saw Smitty, which again, COVID season, we can talk about all that stuff. But like in terms of a career at Alabama, oh my goodness, Amari Cooper.
One of the things that you can never take away from Amari is that he was the best offensive player on a national championship winning team. And I don't mean to disrespect TJ Weldon or Eddie Lacy, but I think that guy was the best player on a national championship team as a true freshman in 2012, much like Brock Bowers was for Georgia 2021, much like Jeremiah Smith just was for Ohio State last year. That puts you in rarefied air in college football if you can do that. And so much of what was impressive about Amari was that he was that ready from the jump. And he actually wasn't even a 5-star recruit. People forget that too, which is a wild thing to look back on. Only a 4-star recruit coming out of the Miami area. But yeah, I do wish, and for this exercise, it would be fascinating to see Amari with a better quarterback in college, like what it would have looked like with a Joe Burrow, because no disrespect to AJ McCarron, no disrespect to Blake Sims, who was, surpassed expectations in 2014. The best version of Amari never had that true game-changing gunslinger quarterback that would have been so fun to line him up with.
Yep, absolutely. I think receiver side, you know who I was thinking of, man, and this kind of goes, I'm going to take a quick detour about running backs because it's like a shorter list. I was between Tony and Dexter McCluster. I think he would have been sneaky here. I started with a lot of smaller guys, and then I started thinking about, you got to play two ways. That's kind of what takes him out of it, is that he wasn't quite as explosive statistically as I remembered. He had a ton of yards, like as far as McCluster, and he was like a big part of the offense. I think he was pretty interesting. I am absolutely shocked he didn't take Jahmyr Gibbs. I thought that was going to be first, second pick.
It's tougher to take a running back. It's tougher to take a running back with this, just because am I going to live and die with swing passes? And then do you have the size to line up on the other side? I'd rather have guys that are so unbelievably elite at separation. And Jahmyr Gibbs is a fantastic pass catching running back. I mean, he was really, really good, but also at Alabama that year, he was really solid. I think he's turned into a better pro. And I've always been a huge Jahmyr Gibbs guy dating back to Georgia Tech. But I don't know that he scares an opposing defense in this setting in the way that you would like him to. And that versatility is almost more because of like how respected he is as a runner. And then maybe you don't necessarily keep defenses off balance knowing that he's going out for a route every single time.
Yes. I think, man, I liked him a lot, and we talked about it at the time, but the amount of highlight plays he made, the amount of clutch plays he made, I liked him a ton. For modern football, I'd probably take him kind of embarrassingly high on Alabama's backs. I mean, like Derrick Henry to me is just the best running back ever. I love Derrick Henry so much. Like, he's useless here. That's the thing, because he would just keep getting penalties because people would try to tackle him, but they just fall down. But a guy that I thought about, height totally took him out of it, but because again, I got a big team. Remember Trenton Holiday?
Oh, that's a good throwback. Return. What he had some ridiculous return numbers, didn't he?
I believe he still has an NFL record for like 2 return touchdowns in a playoff game that Peyton Manning lost, by the way, to the Ravens. Very funny stat about him. But yeah, just a guy that was slippery, uncatchable. But the more I thought of it, the more I was like, what's this guy going to do when he's not doing that? Like, you could, any offensive player could kind of just stand like this, and it would make him a little bit more of a liability. So yeah, that's another like versatile guy I thought about.
A few guys that have to be included in this discussion. Justin Jefferson, I mean, kind of an obvious one. I didn't take him just because I was going to take Chase ahead of him. Chase was the better college player, not by that much, even though it is still weird to look back on Justin Jefferson. I remember one of the last things I did, I've told this story before, so apologies for repeating myself, but one of the last things I did before the world shut down in 2020 was like February of 2020 was go to IMG and spend an afternoon watching him work out for a story that I was working on about him. And one of the things that I remember talking to his speed coach, Mo Wells, shout out LSU, was that he's like, if he runs better than a 4.5, we're golden. And golden meant he'll be a first round pick. Yep. So there's still questions. Is this guy even going to be a first round pick? And obviously the player that he's become in the NFL would obviously everybody would look at that and say, well, of course you would take him in this setting, but that'd be somebody that has to be mentioned as well. AJ Green has to be mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Ridiculously good at Georgia. Another guy just like Amari that just showed up, and from the jump, you're just like, that dude is different. This is going to be fun to watch as long as he's in college. Julio has to be mentioned. In a different offense, in an offense like this, the numbers that guy could have put up and how intimidating he would be to have to guard. Good luck with that. Malik Neighbors probably has to be mentioned. How interchangeable he was. He can line him up anywhere.
Super reliable. I see, that's so many LSU guys, right? And they're just under. Like, that's where I was at with Green and Julio, where I'm like, they're not quite the fastest and they're not quite the biggest. So the things they bring to tackle football that aren't useful here, and I almost feel that way about Neighbors. I would almost rather take BTJ because he was equally big and he could, go down the field like that. Yeah, any of the LSU. I mean, honestly, if we were ranking LSU receivers, Odell is wildly high for me. I think that Odell in that setting is nuts.
Odell is probably nuts. I went so LSU heavy with this. It's really hard not to. Another guy that I thought of, but I knew I probably wasn't going to take, and it was only going to mention an honorable mention. Lynn Bowden.
Lynn Bowden too.
Everybody and their mother knew exactly what he was going to do.
Yep.
And it didn't matter. And it's still, you couldn't get bodies on him. He was still so elusive in space. One of those shifty guys that once he shifted from wide receiver to quarterback, you saw something that was so rare in modern college football, and Kentucky embraced it and went on. I remember mid-season, I wrote a story. It was after like maybe 3 games he had as a quarterback when Kentucky was so desperate. And I wrote the story saying like he should be considered for the Paul Hornung Award. And then Kentucky reached out and they're like, "You're right. We're going to start a campaign for that." And then he won.
Heck yeah. Look at that. Be the change you want to see in the world.
But he was so good 2019. And he's probably going to be one of those guys that gets forgotten. He's forgotten about because he wasn't part of one of these unbelievable teams. But there's a million other receivers you could probably list for something like this. And there are not really a lot of wrong answers.
Joe Adams.
Gosh. We're going to get deep into some names here. I feel like we're about to do.
And you know what's crazy too? I'll close out on this. I feel like we could have ended up with some South Carolina guys, but they were just in that next tier.
Debo would be...
Debo would be nuts. Alshon Jeffrey would be underrated for the same stuff I'm talking about, where like body control and like all that stuff. Again, not with talking about Nick Harbor just yet. Not going to buy that. But we always talk about it. Like they end up with a guy about every other year at South Carolina where you're just like, huh? How did this guy end up here? And like they're all just kind of right there, you know?
Is there anybody else that we have to name? Because Arkansas fans are saying, what about Darren McFadden? Probably. Again, I just have a tougher time taking a running back, knowing that I want a full route tree. And I feel like so much of what's happening is past the line of scrimmage. So it's a little bit different. Yeah, man. A million different ways. Different ways you can go.
Exactly what you said, man. Like, because I'm sure people will be like, "So why did you name my guy?" If your skill set on a football field, pretty much in any way, relies on power. Exactly what you just said. A guy catching you and then being hard to bring down, that takes away from me because you're used to doing that, right? I got to teach you how to do something else. I think Randall Cobb would have been great. I thought about him for a minute. Randall Cobb, but again, right in that next cut, we need something that's like one skill that I can point at and go, okay, that's crazy. Yeah, I think like we talked about, like an Alvin Kamara, just a little too big, like any of these. Now, some of the guys, and you mentioned TJ Yeldon, I think he's a good guy. Robinson from Alabama, that's the type of running back that I think
Brian Robinson,
that could be really useful here, right? But again, not exactly the receiver skills, not exactly the size, not exactly the speed. But if you're going to take a running back, I think that's the style of guy you got to get.
Defensively, I briefly considered Jarvis Jones. Peak Jarvis was a sight to see for Georgia fans. David Pollock would be fascinating if you just told him rush the passer. Just be that guy and watching what he could do to an opposing offense. But I still came back to wanting to have someone with those ball skills as a defensive back, wanting someone that can actually cover a team's best receiver and not wanting to pursue that quite as much, especially when a lot of what they did was more impressive because of the power, because of how they were able to work through and shed blocks and stuff like that. But I mean, like a Will Anderson would still be incredible.
That would be so funny. Yeah, where it's just like, you know why I'm here.
I looked back. I was trying to find, did Will Anderson do any offensive things in high school? I couldn't
Yep.
find anything that said that he did, because if he had had any sort of experience as a ball carrier, I think I would have just lined up Will Anderson and just let the chips fall as they may. But yeah, this is a fun exercise to be able to do this. I'm sure we'll get a lot of different opinions on this. How could you not include this guy? How could you not include that guy? And I guarantee you there'll be 5 or 6 names that I'll be kicking myself about, but I still feel good about my squad. Feel
Yes,
really good.
and you know what? This is probably a weird time to ask this question, but just going forward when we do these, if we were looking at like historic guys that played in like the Big 12 for Oklahoma, those guys are out, right? It only has to be SEC.
Yeah,
players.
As I said with Baker. Okay,
you
have
cool.
to
Just
have
making
played
sure.
in the SEC. Like
Yep.
unlike SEC legend Vince Young. we're not going there.
Yeah,
we're not
cool.
Going. Have
this
to have
is
played
super
in the
fun,
SEC.
man.
Yeah. All right, let's kick it to Josh Pate. Always great to chat with him, as we always do. We hit on a ton of different topics, including Auburn pressure, the team he wants to be married to, the future of the sport, and a whole lot more. So here is Josh. I'm now excited to be joined by a very special guest. It is Josh Pate, the one and only. Not a lot of haters, all the homies, I think. Yeah, we can say that. Mr.
Can you?
Paul Wall.
Because if you want me to pull up my inbox, I got haters for you. I've got several of them. I'll send you some screenshots. You decide what you want to do with them. How about that?
Okay, that's fair. I'm going to say you have no haters. No legitimate haters. Those are all bots. Those
I
don't
didn't
actually
know it was
count.
legitimate. Of course, those
Yeah.
people aren't legitimate. I mean, you just, if anybody has criticism of you, you remove them from your life, even if it's valid, and they are no longer a legitimate person. That's how that works.
The mute button is the best thing that Twitter's ever done. Not the block button, the mute button. It's the best.
Yeah, because you can still remain friends with someone. They don't even know that anything has come between you. Of course, you do that a lot for politics. Your buddy who you grew up with and you know who's working at the restaurant downtown becomes a political commentator. Mute. Buddy, we grew up in the same sandbox, okay? I know you, and you know me, and you know that I know you. Mute. 30-day mute.
I've muted some of my favorite people in this world.
It's crazy. It's crazy. And here's what's even, I would say equally, it's more than equal. It's above and beyond crazy. More than often, these are people who you've hung out with before. And if you go to lunch with that person, none of the stuff that they post, none of the rambling, incoherent nonsense they post is going to come up in real conversation. They're still the same person you've always known, which begs the question, what happens to you when it's 11:30 at night and it's just you and a screen in front of you and a keyboard? Like, what happens? Come back down, like pulling a hot air balloon back to earth. Come back down here with the rest of us. Cindy.
It's always Cindy. Why is it always Cindy?
Cindy's. I mean, no offense. I know there are good Cindys around here, but people are sullying the good name of Cindy.
Okay, so since we last talked, you've gotten married. Congratulations, by the way, on that. Has married life turned you into a softer guy or a different college football brain? Because I warned people before we had our daughter. I said, look, I'm going to get out all these takes that are kind of aggressive, these critical takes before this happens, just because I don't know what it's like on the other side. And I might come out, a softie for everything, and everything's making me emotional. I don't want to criticize anything. Has that impacted your college football brain?
I don't know yet. I think the first sure test of that may be the media days circuit. And then preseason, I mean, here's what you got to find out. In preseason, when you talk about team strengths, anybody can do that. When it comes time to talk weaknesses, are you ready to question the mental fortitude of a 19-year-old left guard in the Big Ten? Are you ready to, or do you realize, man, that guy has parents who may be watching the show. I can't do that to him. To be honest with you, I like to think I know the direction I'll go. I don't know for sure. I will say, don't you think there may be a little bit difference between just getting married versus getting married and then having kids? Because I think having kids is that's really the edge of the cliff. And you walk up to it and you either stare it in the face and then walk back, or you jump.
You're right. Getting married, I guess, come to think of it, didn't change my perspective as much. But I don't know, man. Like, there is just something to be said for those big life changes. And I definitely had a moment afterwards. I was like, I'm a dad now. Do I want to criticize this guy even though his PFF grade is in the 30s? Like, can I sit here and do that? Like, that's not fair.
You remember? I'm not asking you if you remember this. Everyone remembers the TCU Georgia splattering a couple of years ago in the national championship game, and I remember normally like I stay on the field for those games, but that wasn't a game. So I went up to the press box and I was talking to some folks. That's national title game. That's the last time we're going to see each other for several months, probably. So, you're saying your goodbyes and everything, and everyone's joking about what's happening to TCU. And I remember hearing someone say, man, come on now. Those are someone's kids. And I remember looking down on that person with such disdain. Like, these aren't real people. These are football players. This is no different than playing the video game. They don't have hearts and souls. We're supposed to be able to talk about them any way we please. And now I think back, and that was only like 3 years ago. And I think back and like that unnamed member of the esteemed college football press may not have been totally wrong. Still, though, shame on TCU. Well, shame on Kirby Smart, actually. But they may not have been totally wrong.
Georgia players eating chicken wings on the sidelines was way more disrespectful than whatever that media member said.
Oh, especially after we predicted them to go 7-5. That was the worst part. We all thought they'd go 7-5 that year, I'm told.
Look, Nolan Smith said on this show, like that was his confession on this very show. I made that all up. I just ran with it. It sounded like the perfect number.
Yes, I can't believe that.
Yeah.
I can't believe that doesn't sound like the Georgia I know, but who knows? Maybe.
Okay, so I promised you one question that you haven't gotten this offseason, and I think this is it. If you had to be married to one college football program for the rest of the time that their head coach is employed, till death do you part, who would it be? Because I think that question is more interesting now than maybe it was probably at any point in the 2020s or even the 2010s with Saban.
Yeah, unequivocally, the answer is Arizona State and Kenny Dillingham.
Ooh.
Unequivocally. And I don't know, you probably haven't spent a lot of time around Arizona State, but I'm just telling you, if you walk around there and you know the recent history of that place, they're supposed to be dead. It's like watching The Undertaker when you're a kid and you just saw him get buried alive on pay-per-view the night before, and there he is walking down the ramp, and you just think to yourself, wait, Dad, Mom, he died. I thought he was dead. Arizona State, latter portion of the Herm Edwards regime and all the sanctions. You remember how we were talking about them? I was talking about them as a program that was in the best of times going to struggle to compete. But with all that, not thrown in their lap, like thrown on top of their head, that was like dirt being shoveled on top of them. And so then they go get Kenny Dillingham, who no one's forecasting to be a head coach anytime soon. And they go get him because he grew up in their backyard and he's a big Sun Devil and he comes home. And it was perceived as, all right, you got the hometown guy. He'll hold the rope through the dark days. And then once you get out of that, then you'll be able to 5, 7, 10 years down the road, sort of hope to re-elevate. And Kenny said, wait, what? We're supposed to what? It was almost like he didn't even know what reality was. And then he took his personality, he put it in a giant syringe, he injected it into the entire place, and it worked, which is a beautiful thing when that happens, especially when it's a guy who knows the program, who loves the program. That's why I wish Orgeron would have worked out long-term at LSU, because that was that kind of unique fit. I think Shane Beamer at South Carolina feels that way. So I think Kenny Dillingham, as long as he's at Arizona State, they're not winning the Big 12 every year, but I fully believe, like I will commit as an outsider to the way they go about doing things as long as he's there. I know that's a really random one, but having been around them and having understood what they were and what they are, totally believe in what they do at Arizona State.
I love that answer. It's a really, really good answer because if you know the story and the trajectory of what they've been the last 5 years, you're right. It is absolutely amazing to see them already at this level. Similar thought. We'll keep it to this year, though. Who's your favorite player in college football this year? Like the guy that even when you're on the sidelines in College Station or Eugene or something like that, you're on your phone and you're not playing solitaire like Stephen A., but you're actually watching him play football. Like who's that guy for you?
I am a big Caden Proctor fan at Alabama. I like Drew Aller at Penn State. I don't really know DJ Lagway that well. Like those other two guys I know. I don't know DJ Lagway that well, but I just look forward to watching him play. Um, I look forward to what Cade Klubnik has the opportunity to do, and that's much bigger than just himself, like his personal performance. I'm just trying to think. I mean, there are a lot of you could just go through the preseason All American team and talk about good players, but I'm trying to think about ones that have that unique angle about them. I mean, Jeremiah Love at Notre Dame is one of them, and to a certain extent, Reuben Owens at Texas A&M. I
That's a
feel the
good
same
answer.
way about only because those guys could help teams win games in a way that not too long ago a lot of people thought wouldn't be able to win anymore. You know, we're only a few years removed from the period of time where everyone was telling you, oh, the running back position's totally devalued at college and NFL levels. And everybody's got to score 50 to win. And your offense, if it doesn't look like a pinball machine, it's an afterthought, like it's dead and buried and whatnot. So those were a few. I don't know. Who are yours? I'm probably going to
Aaron
think
Anderson.
five.
Yeah, Aaron
Okay.
Anderson is the one that I really like at LSU. That's the first one that I come up with. Reuben Owens was on my all bang the drum team this year at Texas A&M, just because I think people in College Station are so excited about just the fact that he returned late
Yeah.
last season, and now the Le'Veon Moss injury kind of puts him into a more prominent role. Amari Daniel's still going to have work there. Those are two guys that I come back to, like a Bray Hubbard at Alabama is one of those guys. I feel like it's almost unfair to include quarterbacks because obviously we're all excited about Lagway. We're all excited about Arch. Even
Yep.
Klubnik, like the player that he's become. Those guys, even Lenore Sellers has been must-see TV. But I kind of like getting into those other guys of what it's going to look like. Jordan Tyson, you talk about Arizona State. Like, what's he going to look like coming off of injury last year? And a guy that, could be maybe the best returning receiver, not named Jeremiah Smith or Ryan Williams, obviously. So those are kind of more obvious names, but there's a lot I feel like this year in college football, and it's there's really no right answer to that.
Yeah. So extending off of that for a second, this is kind of reminds me of what you just said. Reminds me of something. So there's a perception amongst people who you may be like 47 years old, you work a 9 to 5 job, you have a wife, kids, but your social circle and your life does not regularly bring you in contact with 18 to 22-year-olds. That's a normal 47-year-old's existence.
Fair.
So, like, if I didn't do what I did for a living, I would not regularly come into contact with 18 to 22-year-olds, maybe at the gym, but that would be it. But because I do what I do for a living, I'm around them the entire year. There is a perception out there that I always try and dispel whenever I can, that your 18 to 22-year-old crowd, like, just morally there's been a sharp decline and there's zero attention span and they're all about this and they're not about that. And I got to tell you something. I get where that comes from. Like, I understand where that theory comes from, where that stereotype comes from. I wish I could take people collectively just on field trips with me. You would be staggered, like you would be stunned at how opposite those players are compared to what you think they're like. Because what you find is you're always going to have deadbeats in society. You're always going to have losers. You're always going to have bad apples. But what you find is you've got so on a college football roster now, they're 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. They are the first generation that has grown up entirely in the social media age. They were immersed in it from the time they were born. There was no other world. What's happened is, yeah, there's been some brain rot on certain edges of society, but those kids have known for quite a while they got pretty high upside. Like, they could go on to play college football, be in the NFL, make life-changing money because athletically they've just been God-gifted the abilities. And what they've learned through constant knowledge that you're being observed and everyone's got a phone at all times, they had to sharpen their awareness skills at such a younger age than you did and I did and anyone older than us did, that it's the opposite. It's like being around 40-year-old people mentally, but they're all 19 and 20. And they're so much more aware. They talk way differently than a 19 or 20-year-old would have talked any previous generation. In my theory, I talk to coaches about this all the time. Hardly any of them ever have players arrested anymore. Hardly any of them ever have players in trouble anymore. It's like the disciplinary stuff's just fallen off a cliff. And it's because this entire generation has been made to be aware that someone is watching them at all times, and they've just realized, I'd rather stay in and play video games. Now, I think there are downsides to that. Like socially, does that develop you as much as you would have previous generations? But I don't know how we got down that rabbit hole, but I just wanted to make sure people understood there are a lot of theories you can develop from, watching the colorful end zone celebrations and looking at the anecdotal headlines every now and then. Dude, the world is so radically different when you're around those players than you're led to believe if you're never around them.
So we'll get that on a graphic. Who is Josh Pate's favorite player? And we'll just say this entire generation. Just
every kid. Every
Love
kid. And then we'll have some caveats at the bottom, except for these 2 or 3.
That's true.
Yeah.
By the way, Haynes King should have included Haynes King, favorite players in college football.
He's the quarterback of the sleeper contender for the playoff in America this year, as we know.
I like that. I like that take a lot. You went everywhere this spring. It doesn't have to be biggest takeaway, but what's something that you learned or picked up on during those visits that you've just been kind of thinking about this summer?
Always loved talking to Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart is the most brutally honest guy on and off the record that I encounter. Ryan Day is that way too. And I guess it's no coincidence those two are near or at the top of their profession. And so I think a lot's even changed since I talked to those guys a couple of months ago. Like since then, we've had the house settlement. When I talked to him, it was, all right, if we get this, then that. Well, they've got it now. And the hope amongst a lot of these places, I'd say 95% of the coaches I talked to, the hope was that house settlement passes and everything does get reined in, and they would love to go back to a world that feels more like traditional recruiting felt, where no one was ever ignorant enough to think money didn't change hands. But the money changing hands was all comparable. It wasn't like we've had it the past couple of years, where if O'Gara U offers me $210,000 and then Pate State comes in and offers me $1.1 million because I happen to have a billionaire booster on my payroll. Well, that doesn't matter if you're the best at developing that kid. They're coming with me because they can't turn that money down. No one would expect them to. That takes relationships out of recruiting. That takes the allure of the official visit and making sure you're a good fit and recruiting the entire family and developing that bond. And the developmental piece and proven production at your position and why you should play here over there, that used to be recruiting. That was all gone. It was just a bidding war. And people will tell you it was always that way. Well, BS. You don't know what you're talking about. It wasn't always that way. So that was one theme. Like almost all of them were hoping we could get back to that. And then the other kind of takeaways, I think Steve Sarkisian is the smartest guy that you will talk to. Steve Sarkisian, dude, if you just sit there, you just shut up and listen to him talk, you just kind of toss him, not a softball question, but just lob something to him. He is a guy who always has a 5-layer deep response. And it's not just here's what we do, the why. Like Steve Sarkisian's whys on any of a number of things are so meticulously well thought out. And it's just, I listen to people like him. And this is going to sound like, Texas propaganda. It's more Steve Sarkisian propaganda. I listen to him. And I sometimes think, is that kind of intelligence wasted on just being a football coach? Now, football is the center of my universe, so I hope he coaches football forever. But I listen to people like Steve Sarkisian. And then I listen to the relative incompetence that exists in many other sectors of society. And I say, might Steve Sarkisian be needed elsewhere? They used to say that about Saban all the time. Are we wasting Nick Saban's wisdom and acumen on just being a football coach? Now, they say that pejoratively about football. Again, you and I love that they're football coaches. But there's a sharp head coach in Austin. And then you think about the fact that he's kind of on top of the world with a ton to prove still. Marcus Freeman, kind of on top of the world with a ton to prove still. James Franklin, top of the world, ton to prove still. If you were born in 2015, you might be ignorant enough to say that about Dabo Swinney. He's got a ton to prove. He's on top of the world, but a ton to prove. So there are a lot of guys that you could describe like that. Top of the world, still a ton to prove.
Kirby Smart, top of the world, a ton to prove. What have you done
He
for me
hasn't
lately?
won a title in like
Yeah,
48 months, 60 months, whatever. Like, what? I don't even know what's wrong with it. In fact, what's wrong with the entire SEC?
it's
Once it's
true.
3 years in a row, once something happens 3 times in a row, that's a streak. It has happened before, to quote Lou Brown in Major League. If we win today, that's called a winning streak. It has happened before. Well, the same applies on the other side.
I want to get your take on Auburn because I remember this time last year you were talking about how they're going to be playing a lot of freshmen. That's just reality. And if you just kind of look at the sum of the parts, you'd say, well, they went 1-5 in games that were decided by 10 or less. It was a team that struggled in the fourth quarter. That's kind of what it looks like when a team is playing through freshmen. I think you could point to other things that ultimately where they're undoing, most notably the decisions made by one Hugh Freeze. I think he's got the hottest seat in America. Maybe that's a controversial take. The recruiting lately has just been falling off a cliff. Make of that what you will. But how confident are you that Hugh Freeze navigates this? And by this time next year, we're talking about him in a much more positive light.
Not overly confident. Haven't bailed on him. Not overly confident, though. I mean, really, if you think about it, it all comes down to whether Jackson Arnold works out.
It's true.
Like that sounds very obvious, but what I mean by that is, all right, so Freeze's offense, even when it's clicking, is one of the more turnover prone offenses historically in college football. They're always going to have a higher turnover rate. They really did last year, but it didn't work last year. Even when it's working, even when he was clicking at Ole Miss, they turned the ball over. Jackson Arnold was a turnover machine last year. I'm supposed to just expect those two things to fuse and work. Maybe they will. I have no idea if it will. Maybe they will, but you cannot just think about that in isolation. Like, of course, that's what their hopes this season is tied to. But also, you cannot ignore the recruiting red flags right now. And to me, I mean, it is not 2006 anymore. You lock your signing class down in the summer. There is no let's go play the season, and then all these uncommitted kids will be watching the season, and then they'll decide to sign with us in January. They're already committed. So either you're going to get a lot of them to decommit, which I think they have to plan on doing anyway, or you're screwed. Well, Auburn, to make it work, period, they have to win this year. If they don't win this year, he's in big trouble. If they don't win this year, there's no way they have a signing class that's to the level that they need to have. And so I think it's like watching the seesaw and seeing it's teetering right now. You're just waiting. Like, does the stone get added on this side or this side? Well, the stone is quarterback play this year. It's not a guy that they recruited. It's not a guy they've developed. They are placing their careers in the hands of a portal quarterback. They're not the only ones that are forced to do that in this era, but this time last year, like I was looking at what you were just talking about. Okay, they got a couple of really good signing classes baked in. They were given patience. You got to give Auburn folks credit. They were given patience because they knew Harsin left us next to nothing. This new staff's going to come in. Freeze has won in this conference before, so he's got the proof of performance. Let's give him some time. And they did give him time. And then they had the season they had last year. And you fast forward another year, I say the same thing about Venables at Oklahoma. You can talk about how crazy expectation level is. When you're 3-4 plus years into a job, you don't take these jobs without understanding that level of expectation is going to be there. And you don't take these jobs without understanding if I'm not getting it done, if we're not humming by year 3 and year 4 especially, then I'll be out of a job. That's the trade-off to making the kind of money you make. That's the way it works. So I'm really, I feel like I'm blindfolded, sort of balancing on a railroad beam right now. It could go either way. And I do not think there's a whole lot of skill in forecasting which way it'll go. I really don't.
Diego Pavia said on Bussin' with the Boys that Vandy will run Tennessee. Was that more or less accurate than him saying that he doesn't know who Josh Pate is?
I don't know who Diego Pavia is. I assume that's
That's
got to be a quarterback in this league. Maybe did some noteworthy things last year. Hold on. Wikipedia is telling me, okay, Vanderbilt starting quarterback. Oh, they beat Alabama last year. I remember that now. Okay.
Yep.
So, look, if you're going to call your shot there, and this is real talk now, I do know who he is. If you're going to call your shot, This is the year to call your shot against Tennessee. You're going to go into their building, okay, but it's going to be. I think, do they still play later in the year? Like, isn't that still last week of the season?
I think it's still last week of the season. Yeah.
Okay, if Tennessee's good this year, they should beat you. But if they're off, and they could be, I think it'll be a rebuild year for Tennessee personally. If they are, and you get that deep in the season, then they've also dealt with injury. They may be limping to a 7-5, 8-4 type finish, and you're the difference between 7 versus 8 wins. That is your Super Bowl. Like, as much as they want to talk about their goals of the playoff over there, that's not Vandy. But beating Tennessee to cap a good season, that's their Super Bowl. This is the year. If you can leave, having been the quarterback that beat Alabama and then Tennessee, and before you transferred to Vandy, you took a bite out of Auburn by way of New Mexico State, you're already a legend. But that would make you in state. That would make you a legend. So I respect what he's doing there. Like, he's running his mouth at the right time. And he's already proven that he can back it up. It's not a true freshman coming in that just doesn't know any better. So I'm still leaning Tennessee, but that game's like 5 years away at this point, so we'll see.
I actually think it's a positive when someone says they don't know you, because to me, that's the ultimate sign that they're locked in. That means they're truly not on the internet, because if you're on the internet, you see Josh Pate. Like, that's just reality. Also, if you're in a stadium and you hear the pregame hype video that's playing, that shows me that guy is focused on just what they can control in their own world. They're not listening to the stadium, all the outside noise. That's as locked in as a player can be. Diego Pavia's stock way up after I heard that.
Well, also, I mean, he's like 4 blocks from me. He's just right down the road. So apparently, I can't blame him for this because I don't get out either. Apparently, he doesn't get out and I don't get out, and we're just two little ships. We're not even passing in the night. We're not even leaving the harbor. That's the best compliment / worst critique I could give each other.
Different gym too, different story there.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. You've spent a lot of time campaigning for a position that's never going to exist, college football commissioner. If, let's say, this hypothetical world does exist and you get to your office, before you even sit down in that office chair, what's that first change that you're making going, we're going to fix that. I don't even need to get comfortable. Don't even give me the continental breakfast. I'm going to make this change and make that happen immediately.
Well, you got to do the Captain Phillips conversation with Greg Sankey and Tony Petiti. You got to full on, I'm the captain now to those guys, respectfully. I would love to completely tear to shreds every media rights deal that exists. Since this is hypothetical land and I can do whatever I want to, I detest when people look at college football and just talk about how it should emulate the NFL. But that doesn't mean there aren't some things the NFL does that we couldn't learn from. We just follow the NFL down the wrong road sometimes. But the right road would be what they do with media rights. It is utterly insane to have the media rights package exist the way it does right now, and especially the playoff package, letting one network buy the rights to the entire thing. Like, that's a dereliction of duty at the hands of stakeholders of college football. If I were ESPN, I'd do exactly what they've done. This is no shot at ESPN. This is me thinking to myself, how in the world, as the presidents of these universities, as commissioners, do you not understand the value in every network having a piece of your postseason like they do in the NFL? Because if every network has a piece of the postseason media rights package, then it behooves them to promote your sport hardcore year round instead of just understanding, well, we're filling the blank network here. Yeah, we got some regular season games, but beyond that, we cut the lights out the first week of December. That's terrible for the sport, not to even mention all the conspiracy theories it gives birth to about the playoff selection process and the network that owns the media rights to the playoff also happens to be in bed with one conference. Like, there's just no reason for that to exist. And the only reason it does is because there's not oversight in college football. So I'd love to tackle that first and foremost, and then maybe dive further into the weeds of, all right, well, who should be playing how many conference games? And also, do you really have to have employment model to have collective bargaining? I don't know that you necessarily have to have that. I just think it's a working theory that you do have to have it. So a lot of stuff like that I would tackle. And that would be before lunch. And then after lunch, I don't know what we would do in the afternoon.
All depends on what you would have for lunch too.
Yeah,
That's going to really set the tone.
probably a lot of team building exercises in the afternoon.
True. That was a good answer. The correct answer was actually a 1-year playoff ban for any coach that compares their quarterback to Cam Newton. That was what we were looking for, but that was good.
I thought that was already assumed. I'm going to have everyone breathe oxygen. You're going to drink water, and if you compare your QB to Cam Newton, you're out for 1 year. I would even argue repeat offenders have a lifetime ban.
Yes, and I don't care if you coached him, Gus Malzahn. Just don't do it.
Yeah.
Just don't do it. All right, last one for you. Has the Big Ten overtaken the SEC as the new standard in the sport, or is it still too early to say that?
No, I still say it's the SEC. I think it just all depends on what your criteria is, though. Is the measure of a conference solely their ability to win a national championship? If that's it, then the Big Ten has overtaken the SEC. I think about the competitive depth of a conference in tiers 1 and 2, and even to a certain extent 3, as the better measure of that. And to that degree, not only would I still classify the SEC as the best conference in college football, there's little separation between the SEC and the Big Ten. All due respect to the Big Ten for trying to get their act together when it comes to tier 2. Like, I think one of the biggest hidden stories up there has been Ohio State's always been good. They always will. Oregon will be good. Michigan will be good. Penn State will be good. Oregon will be good. Like, I think I said them twice. Those programs I can count on. To me, the big story in the Big Ten was, for a long time, Nebraska was just inexplicably bad. Wisconsin, ditto. Iowa hasn't been bad, but they've never leveled up. And there are programs, Michigan State, there are programs like that should be every bit in your conference what, for instance, South Carolina or Tennessee is. It has been in the SEC. But they just didn't take it seriously enough. And as you'll notice, a few years ago when that new media rights money kicked in, there was this sort of kick in the pants for a lot of those programs of, we're not just paying you this money to broadcast 3 or 4 teams. So you guys better get your act together. And it's no coincidence that Wisconsin went and got Fickle. Now, that hasn't worked out yet, but they went and got Fickle the same time that Matt Rule was grabbed up by Nebraska, and then Michigan State got really aggressive going against Smith. Now, does it all pay off? We don't know. But at the very least, they've gotten aggressive. Those second-tier teams have gotten aggressive. That's how you close the gap. Like, they're always going to be top contenders in those conferences on both sides of the coin. Your second tier, to me, that's what still separates maybe the SEC a little bit from the Big Ten.
Even just having media days in Vegas is a sign that the Big Ten is taking things more seriously from the the conversation standpoint and all that as well. Which look, I'm sure you'll be doing the media days tour. I'll see you in Atlanta in a couple of weeks. Looking forward to it. And wish you the best of luck on everything. And let's just say I hope that you don't change who you are just as a result of getting married.
If I plan on changing, you'll be the first to know. I agree with you. Sentiment shared. But, cross my heart, hope to live. Let's hope that you recognize me this time a couple of months from now.
Thanks, man.
Appreciate it, brother.
All right, well, let's close with some lad of the week. Who you got?
All right. So I know I talked about this a little bit previously, but a little bit of an update to it. My lad of the week is my Uncle Ricky. So my Uncle Ricky was diagnosed with cancer about 6-8 months ago. And it's been a whole process. And I just said this off air, but shout out to Connor, who's been super awesome with that, going through something kind of similar with his father. And I think that, watching him, who has been a super tough guy, and I talked about, the picture of him during Hurricane Rita riding a horse with the water up to, the horse's legs and going, how am I related to this individual? But, we're going down for the 4th of July, me and my boy, John. And, for Memorial Day, we were out there. He was making, crawfish. He was out there frying fish. He was doing all that. And, he's always been a more like humble, quiet guy. Right now, he can't talk, but he's still super expressive. And, just going over there the other day, getting to see, my niece, his granddaughter, basically, like I got to hang out with her and like set up this little like boxing thing. And he was like smiling from ear to ear. So it just kind of like puts in perspective. And like I said, I think we've had some great conversations about that, where it's like, we talk about sports, we talk about our teams, we talk about like, oh, this is ridiculous, college football expansion, da da da. But when you see something like that, it really brings you back down to earth, and it makes you really appreciative for the people you have in your life and the time that you have with them. And so shout out to my Uncle Ricky. I know like things have not been easy for him. He's been super duper tough, and he's sometimes been almost brave to a fault where it's like, okay. And it's like, man, take some time off, like do your thing. Like he's been at work like throughout this whole process, staying near. Is like his first question was always, can I get back to work? Can I get back to work? And like us as millennials were, okay, let me take time off. Let me figure this out. And so I think like that old school mentality, man, is something that I think people have really lionized today. And it's so rare to see people who truly have it. This guy's a cowboy. He's done everything. He was a BMX rider, dirt bike rider. And so, yeah, I think he's just lived 1,000 lives, and he's had more life in his life than I feel like most people would have in 10. And so shout out to Uncle Ricky, man. He's a man's man. And I'm just really fired up to see him for the 4th. We're heading out tomorrow.
Will you be bringing the crawfish boil to Uncle Ricky?
No, I would never boil crawfish for my Uncle Ricky. I think that
That's a big thing. That's a big deal to do something like that. I wasn't sure if you were going to test those waters, because if someone does it right, you kind of always are like they're the king of whatever this thing is, and that's something that's so unique that I wouldn't want to step into those waters. Literally.
Yes. Exactly. And that's the thing. It's like he could still make better crawfish to be, with all this stuff going on. So I don't want to take that crowd away from him. And just to give you an insight, I don't know if I talked about this on air, but maybe the first time I brought John to his little camp out there on the bayou, they just live caught a baby alligator. Like one of my cousins just caught an alligator with his hands, showed it to John, said, "This is an alligator." John was like, "Oh my God." And John was, he hadn't even started drinking yet. So this revelation was insane to him. He was like, you know what? Let's think about that for a second. I think he has that full memory. So time at the camp, man, is so fire. We got, I don't know if this is like a tradition or if I've just seen a couple of people do it, but we all got that one family member that like drives the boat in an insane way, but it's safe. Like it's like just on the edge of like what could really be a problem. Like my Ricky's son, Scotty, we call him my parents, like Godfather in Cajun. One time he was driving a boat so fast that it ripped my swim shorts off, and I almost lost them in a bayou. And I literally had more athleticism than I've ever had in my life, Connor. I had to dive under a bayou and grab my shorts because I knew if I had to hop in that boat in the nude based on his incredible boat driving, I would have never heard the end of it. So I'm ready to live on the verge for this whole weekend and get out of there and survive to the next week.
Nothing will motivate a man more than the thought of being bottom naked in public. Exactly. That is, you want to talk about elevating your heart rate. You could lift a tree off a car if it meant you're going to be clothed if you're able to accomplish that feat. Mm-hmm. You're exactly right. Everybody does have that family member. Uncle Brad is that dude on the boat. Was literally mentioned when we were on a boat, not Uncle Brad's boat, but his name was brought up on a boat that we were on a couple weeks ago when we were in Dunedin. I hope this guy doesn't drive like Uncle Brad.
Would you rather be boat guy or grill guy in your later
grill
years?
guy? Grill guy all day. No. Because there are a lot of people in this area that have boats, and even in Central Florida, there's enough places that are close by where you can bring a boat to there. My neighbor across the street has a boat that Claire always looks at and points out when we go on neighborhood walks. Mm-hmm. And to me, the stress of towing that boat alone, like don't even get into all the boat maintenance, all the different things that go into that. That pressure is, even if I'm good at it, is not something I want to take on. Mastering the grill, something that I've really prided myself on over the course of the last year, is something that is more superior and so much less stressful. Yeah, you're dealing with an open flame, but it's your flame and you can control it. I can't control that boat that's on the back of a truck. Much less when it's in open waters. No way. Grill guy over boat guy all day.
Two very clear, usually different guys in the family dynamic, though. Yes. And they're very different temperaments. Boat guy can be a little bit more of a wild card. Sometimes boat guy can be a very safe guy, but he goes psycho, and that's why you know you're safe, because he's a safe guy who follows all the laws. But living on that edge, if you get a boat guy in your family that can kind of live on that edge with the tube, that's where you're really living.
And funny enough, the boat guy in our family is also the grill guy.
Oh, watch out. You got a Tyrann Matthew right there. You got
Uncle Brad is, we're calling Uncle Brad Honey Badger because, man, the things that he can do on the grill. He had my cousin Grace just graduated from Indiana. I talked about her last year and how she was just all in with that Indiana season. And they had a massive grad party. And I'm not saying it was Uncle Ricky crawfish boils level of food, because I personally have not tasted the great crawfish from Uncle Ricky, or at least the way that it's been described to me. But dude knows his way around a grill and he's a professional chef, so that's a little bit of a cheat code. But he is both the grill guy and the boat guy and takes great pride. Like, he is most known for those two individual things. So it's funny
That's
to
a
hear
king right there. Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely is. Mine is also, we're going to stay in the family, new family member, actually, Cooper Marie Gende, less than a week old. My new niece was born last week, 6 pounds, 10 ounces. Mama is doing well. Not named after Cooper Flagg. I don't know if I had to clarify that, but I know the draft is hot in the streets still. But Lauren's sister had her third baby. All of their names start with C-O. Collins, Cohen, and Cooper as a Connor.
You got to get a Connor in there, man. Come on.
I approve. And I am the Connor. We don't need another Connor.
Don't need it. Yeah. What if they named it Connor with an E? Then what would you do? You'd have to
riot. Oppose in every possible way. No, because I think they had very briefly. Now, maybe they didn't, and this was just a conversation that I had with like Lauren or my mom or something, talked about the name Connie for a girl. I said, we don't need to go there either. We're good. Cooper's good. I approve of Cooper. All four of the grandkids on that side of the family have names that start with C. And I don't know if this is going to continue to play out that way. We'll see. But I was telling Lauren, while I love those names, those three kids with names that start with C-O, Collins, Cohen, Cooper, when they get to school, elementary school or middle school or high school, whatever it is, if they have the same teacher for something year to year, they're doomed. They're getting called that name no matter what. Now, Collins, the oldest, she's going to be fine. She's not going to have to worry about this. Cohen and Cooper, they're getting called Collins on several occasions.
How do they spell Cohen?
I think they Cohen. Okay,
so like Mets owner, not your long lost brother.
Correct. Not Liam Cohen. I think Mets owner. I don't know why I'm blanking on that. I usually know that. Maybe I just haven't had to write it down as much. I'm just used to saying it. But yeah, it is. Definitely three kind of unique names. And Cooper for a girl. Yeah. Will, I was thinking about this. Maybe you have an example of this that sticks out, of like teacher that calls you by the same name when you get older. And it's a situation that's, you're just like, oh, really? I still got to deal with this. As a younger brother, I dealt with this. The most significant example that sticks out in my memory, 5th grade, elementary school, we had the school president election. Okay. I'm one of like 6 kids that ran. This is a totally off the rails story. I don't even know why I'm telling this, whatever. There was like 6 or 7 kids that ran for school president. And the person who was going to be telling us the election results was my homeroom teacher. A homeroom teacher that did not have my older brother, Ryan, in any class. My older brother, Ryan, was in 6th grade, wasn't even at the school anymore. Okay.
He doesn't even go here.
He doesn't even go here. So fast forward to this announcement. When everybody's nervous, we're all like huddled together under this corridor for whatever reason, because we were doing that before it was going to be announced to the school. And Mrs. Goldsmith, God rest her soul, she's still alive, I think. She says, and the winner of our 5th grade class president is Ryan Oak. And then she stops herself. And I'm in the moment, I'm like, I just won. I know what she just did. And I know that she's about to say, because I'm looking around like, there ain't a Ryan here. I got a brother named Ryan.
That's me. Yeah.
I just won this election. And then sure enough, she like stops herself. She's like, oh, I can't believe I just did that. The winner is Connor O'Gara. But I'll always remember that. Because he wasn't even at the school. Ryan and Connor are 2 very, very different names. And I still dealt with that in part because my older brother was very good at a lot of different things. Did not win class president, though, the year before. And your boy did. So I'm just saying, it is still at the top of my resume. Yeah, just saying, had to flex on the people for that.
That's fire. And yeah, I mean, I'm an only child, but I will say my mom used me for marketing. I've been talking about this a little bit at work, where I'm like, okay, like when I was born, my mom put me on billboards and used me as kind of like a funny plot device in her marketing.
Did you sign like the PDF? What are the DocuSign? Did you have to sign that as like a toddler and as a baby?
This was the 90s in Louisiana, so I think there was, I don't know, maybe like I had to sign an alligator or something. I don't know what the legal process. I'm sure there was all kinds of, they would look into my employment status when I was 5 years old. But anyway, my mom, when I was born, called me, I'm glad that I'm putting this deep in the podcast. My mom, when I was born, called me Bean. and everybody called me Bean. So if I run
Bean,
in,
like singular bean.
like a little bean. And so
Yeah.
I was a little chubby Eric Cartman kid. Everybody called me Bean. So if I run into people who had known me from back in Louisiana, like way back in the day, like when I was like in elementary school, they'll be like, and how's Bean doing? And my mom, when I was in middle and high school, was like, no, don't call him that. And now we just laugh about it because I'm like, calling a grown but man Bean is really funny. So whenever I get it, the rare case, I'm just like, yeah, I don't really go by that anymore. But
There's nothing wrong with that nickname because my aunt, different aunt, not related to or not married to Uncle Brad. My Aunt Jean, who is my mom's triplet sister, we call her Jean Bean. I've called her Bean. She is listed in my phone as Bean. She wants Claire to call her Bean.
That's
one
adorable.
day. So there is a right time, right place for the Bean nickname. It doesn't have to be all bad, but from your perspective, yeah, I probably wouldn't want to be called Bean when you were in high school and whatnot.
Yes,
that's tough.
Exactly. Yeah. But congrats to your whole family, to Cooper and the 3 C's.
Thank you. Yes, the 3 C's, 4 if we're including Claire. Yes, it's a movement. C's are taking over the world. All right, we have one more pod before Media Days. Again, as I mentioned, that'll be Matt Flynn next week. If you have not, please leave us a 5-star review. We have tons and tons of great content that's going to be coming up this season on our YouTube channel, Saturday Down South on YouTube. Go subscribe there. You can watch every single episode and more. Go, as I said, also in the beginning of the podcast, use that promo code to get in the daily fantasy space. Dabble, SDS2, $25, no deposit required, $25 in bonus cash. Use that today. Sign up for it. And again, follow us on Twitter at the SDS Pod, at Set Down South, at CJ O'Gara, at Go So Hard. Thanks, guys. Talk soon.